Hello friends. I'm gonna make a stained glass window. I'm gonna show you the process of what I do in a concise video that's gonna give you the heads up on what's involved. This is a copper foil technique as opposed to a leaded window technique that you cut up soft pieces of lead cane. This is one where you cut out glass pieces and you line it with foil, copper foil tape, and then you tack weld those together with solder. I have a commission based on somebody who wants to have a reef or an underwater scene of some clownfish and a crab. So what I do initially is I sketch out a rough thumbnail of how I see the elements. They wanted some anemones and a starfish and everything, so the idea is to lay it out, show them that they want the placement a little bit differently. What I do is I scan this thing, take a picture of it, suck it into Photoshop. I can move the crab around with the lines. The idea then is I take the line drawing and then I can fill it in with color right here. I can put in colors, see color choices, how it all harmonizes together, if it looks good, if it doesn't, if they don't like the color, if they want a different one. Then, based on that, I start working on the scale drawing for the pattern. The life-size version of what the glass is supposed to be like. I get photo references so I can look at proportions from Google Images or from magazines or whatever. And I go in here and I start sketching how I want my lines to be. This is all about lines and how the simplicity of the lines. I can't really have so much detail where I'm going to have leaded lines you'll see later. Too many leaded lines is going to be too distracting. Okay, I'm finishing the scale drawing of the whole design here on this tag board. And what I want to show you is when you design these shapes, what you actually have to have is you can't have a piece of glass where it's going to be thinner in one middle part where it could break. And one of these shapes is this one right here. This is a piece of coral here, or an anemone, and it's going to come down like this. And it's going to come around here and like here. This is the background. This is part of the water. Here's another anemone here. Now, if I don't have a cut here, this piece of glass could potentially break, or I'm going to be doing my darndest just to grind this in, and then over time it could break. So this actually does need, I tried to erase it to show you, but this needs to have a lead line right here, a separation between these two glass pieces for strength. And next, the plan is, with a Sharpie, I have to name I have to number all these throughout the whole piece. Next, I have laid down parchment paper for baking. See-through, it's a little bit more resilient than tissue paper. And weigh it down with whatever you got on hand so it doesn't move. And you're gonna trace your design. This is gonna be your underneath template. Everything is numbered, okay, every piece. You're gonna renumber these pieces, so you know when you cut the glass and all your pattern pieces are cut out, you're gonna know which piece goes on what piece. Look at all these pieces. I mean, if I had this little piece over here, and I don't know that this is number 45, I'm gonna be searching for a long time. But if I can just look in the pattern, see, when I number the pieces too, I go 45, 46, 47, all in the same vicinity. So I say 33, 34, and 35. I'm not going over here to 35. I know where to look for it if it's in the same proximity. So that's something to consider. You're gonna get yourself some pattern shears where there's 3 blades. There's 2 blades in the bottom and 1 on top. It goes right down the middle. And what that does is it gives you a separation, a space in the pattern. So if I take a piece of paper here and cut it like a scissors, look at that space right there. That's gonna give you a space for the solder to go between the 2 pieces. You cut out the pattern piece like this. You have a little channel here. You want a little space. Gaps are going to help you out because they're going to strengthen your piece. We're doing all of the pattern pieces with a Sharpie, outlining them. This is the pattern piece here. It's it's rigid and it's durable enough where it's not going to fall apart like regular paper. Because if you're going over it over and over, you'll understand why. It's good to have. I'm glad I actually used this. I was thinking when I cut it out with the pattern shears and an X-Acto blade, it was too much. But you know what? It's working for this right now, so it pays off. You want to do it backwards, because the other side of this glass, I like the texture more. So you got to choose which side you like the texture. The texture actually is going to go face down. You're going to want to choose the smooth side to cut your glass. So let's just say I make I do the Sharpie, which will wash off. That's a trick. Sharpies are cool. I've never used a China marker unless I'm going on black glass, which I'll see if I do, but the Sharpie rules. And then also here's one other mention. So I have all these pattern pieces that I outlined already, and I have a bunch of other small ones. In all these open spaces, you're like, oh yeah, well, why don't I just throw these in here and outline these all and fill up the piece? Well, because I'm not gonna buy like more glass than I need to increase my budget, I'm gonna save these little guys to put in afterwards. But check out how I have these lined out, how I have them spaced out. You have to have an allowances for your large cuts to get this thing split. So for instance, I know right here that I'm gonna cut this one first down the center line and take off this piece here so I have access to a cut from this side. And what I notice here is that if I come through here, I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna hit this unless I come through here and I find my way around through here all the way to the other side, making a clean break. I can't really go from here on the second one. I'm gonna hit this, or I could follow this, I guess, but that's gonna be kind of an awkward angle. Actually, that one might actually do work. But the point is to plan out your cuts accordingly so you can go and chunk it out into different pieces. Then you can go up and break it up. So that explains why I don't have anything here yet, because I don't know where my cut line is going to be necessarily. It could come from in here. It could come from when I cut this piece off here. I might have extra glass. So don't sacrifice the whole thing by getting it split, and then you're basically going to paint yourself into a corner. Okay, so basically with this one, I have a shape here. I could really just go to town and just do my little cut here and cross my fingers that I split it right on the cut. But this particular glass has a grain to it. And what I found is that however they poured the sucker, it actually goes with a grain and it wants to follow a grain. So if I start cutting, I might be okay with the outside, but the inside, if I cut here and I start splitting, it's gonna come right down here and I'm gonna ruin this whole piece of glass and jeopardize a major section of the piece that I just bought. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to actually cut from here straight across here, and I'm going to do some little curves in here or grind it out. But maybe I can demonstrate how to do some curves. For this one, you can actually get away by doing a cut. Instead of going around here, you can do a cut here, cut there. And check this out. I'm going to do that instead. You want to wear goggles when you cut glass, especially grinding glass. And I'm probably adding about at least 5, maybe 6 to 7 pounds of pressure. Now watch this. I don't go straight to this edge. I'm going to offshoot it a little bit. I'm going to give it some room on this side, because what's going to happen is it's going to want to break. The underside of the cut is going to come underneath where I want it to break. And it's going to break down from here. Basically, you're going to know with experience. I would always give yourself a little room when you're going to go for long corners. You want to have the cut on the edge of a corner this high and then grind the rest off. So with this one, you can either tap it down at the bottom here if you feel like you need to help it along. But this one is simply, I'm going to grab a hold of it and pray that it doesn't. See? Now, I don't know if you can tell, but it kind of goes under a little bit. Well, I'm good. Shazam. cutting straight across. Now I mark this arrow because I don't want to lose this corner. Whatever I do, I don't want to have that break off or file that off on the grinder. So I'm making sure that I keep that one. Okay, so now this is how I do the curve. If I do this whole thing, I have the risk of breaking it, and it's going to come here and catch the grain, and it's going to split down here. I don't want that. So whenever you do circles, this is what people do. They make concentric circles like this. They do a score right here. They do a score right here. They do a score right here. And I might grind the last one out. I don't mark it when I do this anymore. I do this and I can see the score line by the light. But just to show for the video. There's 1, 2, I'll do another one. And then I grab it as I would normally. You can flip this sucker over so the arch is on the top, and you can, like grousing pliers, break it off that way, chew it, but then it's gonna get all jacked up. And see that? See how that just broke off there? Okay, that's the closest I'm going to take it to that edge. I'm going to grind out the rest so I don't jeopardize the whole piece. Okay, here I have everything taped in place where I'm going to solder. Some of it's foiled, the edges. And I have a slight channel here for the solder to actually go inside. See that? That's important. It adds strength to the piece. Okay, so I'm gonna have liquid flux, this is what I use, and I put a little bit in a jar so I don't contaminate the bottle. That's important. When you pick up stuff from your brush, your flux brush, you're gonna be cleaning your solder if it's been sitting around for a little bit, and you don't want it to contaminate your bottle. You wanna make sure that you have proper ventilation, as well as maybe an open door, have a window open, or the garage door open. You probably would want to have a fan going, but right now, because I'm just going to tack weld these together, I am not going to worry about it as much. I'm not going to try to breathe the fumes, but if you do have a fan going, you can angle it so it's pulling the air away from your station. A small fan. I already have my iron heated up, and I'm going to just gently tack them in. Tack weld, baby. You don't want to put any solder on the tops where your came channel is going to go on the top. You want to have that have a nice open space for that as well. And I can kind of see from the reflection where I laid that little bit of. So I have my curves here. You do your best without splitting your glass with your cutter. You have to get really good at cutting the glass as close as you can. You know your limitations, and you try to do the rest with either a grinder or a jigsaw. And notice my fingers. I need to have gloves. Learn the hard way, but I just tape my fingers because the tiny little nicks of glass will slice your fingertips. It doesn't really draw blood, but it kind of hurts. So here's my first pass. You want to get rid of all the glass particles from your grinder. You don't want to transfer those over to your template where you're going to do the soldering. So you check it out, see what you're missing, what you're lacking, what you can take out more. There's a little bit of overlap in some spots. No, but there's a little excess. So you have this numbered here, 190, and you put it right in here. See how it fits. See how I could actually, this is too tight here. There needs to be more of a space. So you need to grind that out. So take a Sharpie. get my camera to focus. Just a little hint of where I need to go with the grinder. Maybe some in here. Definitely some in here. I don't want to be going over on the fish as much as I can. I need to leave space for that. And what I want to do is just not go too much, because I can always grind it later. But once I'm sure, then I can foil the edges. Okay. Let's check it again. You know, a lot of times I've mentioned how I do this, and I'm not the only one, obviously, but when I tell people who don't do this, I say, what are you doing? I'm doing this glass thing project. And I'm like, oh, it's like paint by numbers with glass. I said, yeah, it's kind of like that. And then I thought about how funny that is to say. It's not that simple. People who don't do this, they don't realize how complicated this can be. It doesn't have to be, but when you want to make good curves, you want to really dial in these edges. You're carving the lines. You're not just putting some pieces together in a pretty little jigsaw. This is the art right here. See, I'm lacking this. This is what bothers me. Right in there. I did too much. Just have to compensate somehow. It might work out if I don't crowd anymore. If I just take a little, I could foil that actually. I could foil this see how the foil comes right here? I won't overlap so much foil here, and I could actually overcome that. But this is the process for the whole piece. See how that's a nice channel in there for the solder to go in? But stuff like this is what you gotta look out for. It's actually gonna be okay. You won't be able to entirely notice, but what I could do is I could take a little bit off of here, make this straighter, or cut a little bit of this off and follow this curve. See? So then the channel, it won't bulge. You don't want to have this bulge of solder right here. You want to keep consistency with your lines if you can. A little variation is fine, it's the art. And actually it doesn't really matter, but it just depends on how perfect you want to be with it. That's probably what I'll wind up doing. Another thing I wanted to quickly mention, so the direction of flow with the lines in the glass, the textures. You can have things just go straight across, you can have it go up and down, ragged, chaotic, but when you're actually, if you're thinking ahead and you want to actually have the grain follow a certain flow, like a contour, I know that I have a grain that kind of follows the sand line here. So if I have these two pieces here, I want to have the lines kind of follow this. This is my idea anyways. It's not right or wrong, it's just my idea. So I have here of how I put a line with pencil of where I want the grain, the wispiness to follow, okay? So what I do with that is I mark that out. On the opposite side, I see through to see where the line is. And when I place it down, right here, there's a nice straight line of wisp color right through here. I know that that green is going to follow how I want it to look on the piece. I have to rotate it out how it's actually going to go. It's not going to necessarily go straight across. That's just being really, really dialed in. It may or may not make a difference, but I think in the long run, with the aesthetic of the piece, hopefully it'll add a little extra touch. So notice when I have a piece here, when I have these points, the points actually do matter. They're critical. If I file these points down by accident, thinking it's just a straight line, you're gonna get some muddled line work. So if you can critically look and see where you need to grind out, you're not gonna be able to cut that with a straight, with a scribe, with a glass cutter, unless you're really good, which you can, but then you pose the risk of splitting the glass where you don't want it to be, and you're losing money. So I'd rather be conservative on my cut and then grind out exactly what I need. Cut as much as you can based on your experience. I'm learning what I can and what I don't want to risk. So when you do that, I've just making little, on the opposite side of where I have these little points that I want to preserve, I mark those with arrows to tell myself, do not grind those off. keep those in as much as you can, and then put them on the pattern. Look, check out how they look, and then you can actually grind them in, zero them in how you need to. But that's just my approach. Here I am with a quick shot of me foiling a piece for the crab leg, where that's the smallest I can find, where I don't want to have it too wide going over the crab legs and muddy the edges. So I'm going to lay it down thin on one side and overlap it fat on the other side. And with that thick part, I can cut off an X-Acto blade and make sure that I'm going towards the edge thinner so it doesn't show through the back. Just a quick illustration of how I go about burnishing the edges when I'm laying down this foil. I have a clean edge from the front where I lay it down, and then I just cut it with what I can with the X-Acto blade. I'm really careful of burnishing down the edges with a dowel or my burnishing tool, so I don't have any flux or anything going between the glass and the foil. The idea is that if I can burnish it down pretty flat, I can lock it in and I don't get any air gaps or flux stuck between the foil and the glass. It's going to really strengthen and lock in that piece of glass. Okay, so what I have here is I have all the pieces put together, and I have pins on each side, locking it into the dimensions that I need. So once the zinc frame is attached, I have liquid flux that I use here. This is what I tend to use from Glastar. I have my soldering iron heating up as we speak. I have a fan that's pulling the fumes away from me with an open door or window, garage door. I'm going to use a 50-50 solder, and that's going to be the channeling that's going to go interlocking in the glass. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to interlock as much as I can. I have my soldering iron heated up to what I need it to be. You're going to find your own sweet spot. Mine's at 460 degrees. I use steel wool to clean the tip. I have it nice and shiny. So if I just start off at a small piece right here, I'm going to dab it. See that puff of smoke? You don't want to be breathing that. The reflection of the light, I can see actually where I dabbed the flux on. All I need to do is just lay it in, and I'm tack welding all these together. After I'm done tack welding all these pieces together, I'm going to go over the whole thing, just a flat solder weld, and then I'm going to flip it over, do the same thing on the other side, and then I'm with the 50-50 solder. Then on top of that, I'm going to do 60-40 solder to make the nice top bead. Then I'm going to flip it over again on this side. I'm going to do the top bead with the 60-40 solder. After I'm done with all this soldering, you want to wipe off your solder tip so it doesn't oxidize. My hands have been touching this. I don't have any open cuts, so I'm fine, but I don't want to eat after I touch the solder. I'm going to use this special soap called D-Lead soap. Removes heavy metal. Okay, excuse the reflection, but that's the light I have for the garage. So what I have here is I have these pieces with some simple Scotch tape, paper tape, so they don't float around and they don't move on me. I like the width of where they are. They could float up and down where there's a space, too much of a space on one side. I don't want it to be crowding the other side of the glass piece. So I have them kind of floating in the middle, and I like it right there. I tape it down, and then I tack weld around there. Do a little blot, blot, blot. So this locks me in. So then once the whole thing is done, I'll float solder right between all these channels, really flat, with 50-50. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 5. Yeah, you don't want these things to move when you're tack welding them. If they move, then you gotta move them back. So you gotta make sure that they stay where you want them to stay. 1, 2, 3, 4 in the middle. Okay, so we're gonna move this board. I have a board right here that I screwed down like a trim board at the bottom of the panel to keep it from sliding off. This is gonna rest on here, so we're gonna gently put it to the ground. This is to support it from the back. The stained glass is way more stronger when it's vertical. And then I'm gonna hold it from the joint, and I'm going to flip it. This glass is right here. Let me get on the other side of it. Gently put it back on the lip. And now the towel is going to help cushion any imperfections when it's laid flat again. So now, I'm going to lift it up gently. You got it? You know what I can do is I can just slide this gently over the towel. So get a little bit of flux. I'm doing the flat portion on the reverse side. Kind of like tinning, but a little bit more, but not as much as a solder bead. Doesn't have to be really good looking, it just has to be enough for the support for the underline. The base layer. And then I'll do the 60-40 on top of this 50-50. You gotta really look to make sure you cover the edges of the foil. I think when you do the 60-40, it's a little bit less heat than this is. This takes more heat. And so when you do the less heat for the 60-40 on top, you're not gonna melt through, if that makes sense. So starting off soldering the top with flat solder bead, 50-50. Filling in the gaps. A light dusting of the liquid flux. What I mean is I don't paint it in, I just get it wet. I don't want too much in there, otherwise it's going to bubble up and spatter. I don't want to spatter. I got the fan on so I don't breathe the fumes. See how that's all flat? It's just very fun to just go over it. All the line work that you put into the foiling and the cutting now pays off. Because you can actually see the shapes as they might appear. And you don't hold it on any glass piece too long, because that could cause the glass to split from heat expansion. So just once you go over it, leave it alone. You're going to go over it again with another solder bead on the top anyways. But try to not leave any holes, because those holes could fill up with flux, and those could spatter afterwards. Do this for the whole piece. Okay, so I'm putting this roller in here to raise up the glass so that the cane piece isn't tilted one way or the other. So it's straight, going straight with the glass. You want the bottom edge or the side edge to go completely perpendicular or parallel to the glass, if that makes sense. Okay, so this is the back side of the panel, and I fluxed it pretty well at each joint that I'm going to attach. My soldering iron is heated up. I'm going to use a little stronger 60-40 solder for this one. And I have everything lined up. The glass is not tilting the cane. And I'm going to put plenty of it, all the flux in there. I'm hoping is going to melt its way in. You're going to apply a little bit of heat on there, on the actual zinc, so you can make a nice bond. Another thing that I didn't do, which is a good idea, is that if you have cane that has oil on it, you might not want to bond good, so you can put take steel wool and get the cane really shiny. That's something that's probably a good idea. I'll do for the other pieces. Also, if you're using 60-40 after your 50-50, you want to turn down your soldering iron a little bit, I believe. That will help so you don't burn through the 50-50. So watch this. I don't know if you can see that. You're just gonna let that drain in and fill up that channel by holding it on the zinc for a few seconds. Still putting a little bit of pressure towards the glass, taking that solder bead, pulling it towards the joint, holding it down, and letting it go, letting it harden up. Now this is the reverse part of the panel, so it's awesome. I don't have to get this completely perfect. What I'm caring about is the other side, right? So I'm just gonna make sure that this thing doesn't get pushed down. Put a popsicle stick in here, as well as the towel helps everything elevate. Give a little slight pressure towards the glass. Pull it on there, baby. Just hold it on. Voila. The flux is your friend in this case. You want all that stuff to drain in there. The flux is going to help it just river down and pool inside there. That's why I had all those copper foil pieces kind of exposed. And we can add a little bit more on top. Nice solid joint. And when we do the other side of the joint, believe me, that's going to be a strong joint. So this is going to be the front side of the panel. I already did the back. Now with this zinc frame attached, I can gently, because it's very not as tall as it is wide, I can gently just hinge it like that and put it down. Very strong this way. So to attach the zinc frame, the zinc cane, I have my soldering iron heated up, and literally just put big blobs of solder right here, solder balls. Now what I do is I put some flux on the frame itself. So now I'm going to melt the solder ball onto the cane. Drag it over, hold the soldering iron to the cane as it heats up. It's going to create a really solid bond. All the extra solder that pulls onto there, I can sand that off later. This one I'm letting the 60/40 solder really pull on top. As tall as I can get it, because this is the side that I want it to be presented. And if I don't like it, I can go over it. Just you don't want to wait. You don't want it to go over it right away. You're going to melt through, so you want to wait a little bit. See that solder ball here? I'm going to grab that in a little bit. Okay, you see this corner right here? I have two mitered edges coming up here at 45 degrees. I have a space. If I just do solder here, it's gonna still, I can't really bridge that space. So here's a little trick that I learned back from doing some of the other ones. You put a little piece of copper foil tape in there, sandwich it in. It just has to have something to rest onto. Put a little bit of flux in. See that? If you place it pretty deep enough, then when you sand it over, you're not going to hit the tape. Just get it a little wet, barely. Just tip my soldering thing. See how you can't see it? I mean, it's kind of lined up. I can cut the rest out with the X-Acto blade. There we go. Look at that. If I get an extra blob of solder, I pull it back and I try to move it along without burning through. If I've held it on too long, my solder's hot enough, it'll burn through, so it'll melt through. So I try not to do that. See that, all that stuff there? I don't want to get that on there. I want to pull it off, but I'm not going to overdo it right now. Nope, didn't want to do that either. See how that's stuck there? I took out that curve. See how it took out that that narrow piece? I guess that's the danger of going too narrow. There we go. See how I pulled that back? You have to pause though, you can't do it right away, otherwise you'll melt through. It's almost like painting with solder. That's unintentional, see that? Pull that, I'm gonna let it cool off. stop the video, come back, and I'm gonna pull that sucker off. Okay, next, after I do all the soldering, you need to neutralize the flux. Gonna wipe off gently all the solder balls that have come in here so you don't scratch the glass. I don't think you will, but you just have to be very gentle. And if you're gonna notice a bunch of looks like rusty water coming out of here, I think that's the flux being neutralized by the quick clean. You wipe it all down. Spend a good amount of time before you patina, get all the flux neutralized. Here we are next day. I want to take not so fine steel wool. This will break apart and leave a huge mess when I patina. I've learned to use thicker, slightly thicker steel wool. And apparently if you let the solder go more than a day or even hours later, it starts oxidizing depending on your area. See all that stuff that's left over? I guess that's an inevitability, but I'll have to get rid of that, blow that off afterwards with a canned air. But you can gently go over the solder, just don't press hard. You're not gonna hurt your glass, but you wanna brush off any oxidation off of the solder. Get it nice and shiny and exposed to the raw elements, so it'll start working its magic with the chemicals and the patina, copper sulfate. Now I'm going to sand the edges. If you have any dust in the air from the metal, you don't want to be breathing that. So mask, goggles, and Dremel time. This is when you do the dremeling. I also want to make sure that I don't have too much solder on this side. This is the bottom of the panel. I don't want to have all the pressure sitting on a piece of solder. I want it to be distributed through the whole thing. So make sure this thing is flat. So you want to get a straight edge. You just want to eyeball it. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so now that I'm going to start the patina, I've started a little bit. I was reading, I want to get really black patina, so I'm using the Q-tip just to start off with the fresh solder. You don't want to double dip this patina, you're going to contaminate it. So wear your safety goggles. You don't want to get it in your skin, on your hands, in your eyes, anything. This stuff is very corrosive. So dip a little bit in. Once you use this Q-tip, you throw it away because it's not gonna be good anymore. So I'm just gonna paint the top edges for right now, and I'm gonna probably do a second pass. I usually spray the stuff on and I move it around with a scrub brush, which I'll do. But I just wanted to see if I could get this darker. And then apparently once you add your patina, it could stain your glass. So after it soaks in and it dries a little bit, you want to wash it off all the glass as soon as you can. Fresh side, dip it. And watch the magic unfold. Okay, so those are the fish that I did with the Q-tips. It took me like 10 minutes. I'm not gonna spend all that time. I mean, I could, but I want to just spray this whole thing now. What I have here is a dedicated spray bottle for black patina. Nothing else goes in the spray bottle. Nothing else touches this brush but the black patina. I'm gonna go over here. You want to get a shot of that? So I'm just gonna spray here. Now notice, see all that on the glass? I don't want to keep that on there for too long. I don't want it to stain the glass. It's not going to, it's just going to be harder to clean off. So after this is done, I'm going to wipe off the glass as soon as possible and let this patina soak in and do its magic for a few minutes before I wipe the solder off. I'll probably literally leave it for 25 minutes to let it do its thing. But the glass, I probably want to get it cleaned off within a couple minutes. I don't want it to air dry like that. Okay, so I just have a dowel here that I sharpen like a pencil, like a craft stick, and you just get your cloth in here, and you just get really in the corners, and you try to get out all the excess build up. There could be a little bit of extra patina. Hopefully, it's all washed off with your alcohol. But there's some crud in here that can come off, but you don't want to have any hazing. Get all the nooks and crannies. You can kind of see it, but get in there good. Especially with the tight corners. So if you can back it up and you can look through the window, come from right here. If you look through the window, take your clean cloth, and then you can actually look in here through the sun and see what you're missing. It's a lot easier to look through with a window, with a light, where the stuff is built up. Get any build up off. Okay, I use the Clarity Stained Glass Finishing Compound for the polish. You gotta shake it up really good. You don't want to have it be separated. You want it to be smooth like milk, is what they say. And after all the patina is washed off of the crevices with isopropyl 91% alcohol with a cotton swab, then you're gonna protect the patina and the glass with the wax finish. So you're gonna pour it on like this to spread it all around. As you can see, fully coat everything. It doesn't need to be saturated. It just needs to have an even cover. Cover all the metal, cover all the glass. Be sure all the corners are covered. It helps to do this on a sunny day so you can actually see where you need to work as far as getting the stuff off again. Cover your zinc frame. Once everything is covered, use a clean cloth. Use a clean cloth and just start circular motions, wiping it off, getting a new clean part of the towel, back and forth, up and down, side to side, you name it. Gently buff it out. Change it up for another clean piece. And this is where I think the window comes to life. After all the work that you put into it. You do this on a sunny day and look through. This is where you get the payoff. Now I still have a little wet edging where I can still work on it, but lift it up like this. And now you can really hone in here and dial in where you need to work. Get the polish out. But look at the whole work and time involved. I still can't believe it after looking at it. Hopefully they like it, where this window's going to.
Oh, Oh, okay, really?
That's the opposite. That's the
Oh, yeah.
outside of the window. This is the inside of the window.
Oh my God.
Yes.
That is, it's
Yes.
actually better. I mean, it's even better.